Well, the future of policing still include body-worn cameras. The devices are under scrutiny as yet another police force is rejecting their use. The RCMP recently announcing the current technology does not justify an investment in thousands of body cameras, over 750 detachments. Aside from cost, the cameras have raised many privacy and legal concerns, prompting questions over storage and management of recordings. Some municipal police forces in Alberta have explored the use of body cams through pilot projects. Edmonton Police decided earlier this year to pause a plan to outfit 60 traffic officers, a decision said to be based on funding. Calgary Police were expected to be the first major force in Canada to roll out the cameras in 2017, but an October announcement stalled that contract, stating they've proven unreliable and could lead to legal issues. Erin, to you first this time. Do body-worn cameras still have a place in the future of policing?
I think they will have a place in the future of policing, because I think, as we've seen in the U.S., that it seems to be a prominent feature and a prominent piece of equipment for many police forces in the U.S. I think the Canadian police forces are taking their time somewhat, because unlike the U.S. that has a number of different legal structures, state by state essentially, I think what we are trying to do in Canada is ensure that there's some sort of consistency, hopefully, with regard to legislature that's dealing with these cameras. So, for example, the privacy issue that you brought up in your introduction, that's a fairly prominent and problematic issue with respect to when cameras are turned on and off. So I think there's a lot of things to be sorted out, and moving slowly makes a lot of sense.
Mark, how much debate should there be over the use of body-worn cameras?
Well, I believe they serve a valuable purpose, not only for the public, but for the officers involved in incidents. I mean, they're an eye. I mean, and as the police say, there's only one window. You're only looking out of one window, but they provide objectable evidence and provide some insight into what leads to an incident and what's the outcome. And I feel that the technology, the costs associated with body cameras is going to decrease, and the quality is going to increase. And, you know, whether it be body cameras or little drones or whatever, the whole aspect of visual recording is here. And as Erin says, you know, the privacy issues need to be weeded out. But I believe that they'll be in, 5, 6, 10 years, they'll be just a staple of policing.
Greg, is video the best evidence?
Well, from a defense perspective, it can be, and from a Crown perspective, it also can be. If you're asking me from practice in defense law, I'll tell you that sometimes video evidence is great for the defense, and sometimes it's great for the Crown. Sometimes it discloses exactly what the officer says, and sometimes it discloses something that's slightly different or very much different. I think at the end of the day, I agree with Mark. I mean, from a holistic perspective, from a public perception perspective in terms of the administration of justice, video evidence is really, it's what the public wants to see. It's the strongest evidence. It's the most unfiltered evidence. It comes without human bias, human frailty of faculty, and it's provided to the public. I mean, it is one aspect of evidence. I mean, sometimes it tells a part of the story, but I think from a public administration or public confidence in the administration of justice, it's integral, and it's going to become more and more important as life goes on.
Greg, don't you think, though, there might be a potential, though, for some unintended consequences?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what people don't realize, though, is that often when people feel they're being recorded, they act differently, both police officers as well as civilians. Now, that can have good and bad unintended consequences. Officers, people may say, well, it's going to hold them in check because they're going to be recorded and there's not going to be excessive force. But on the flip side, there's a loss of humanity, I think, between the police officer and between the general public when they know that they're being recorded on both sides. People are not as engaging, they're not going to be as open, and they're not going to be as human when they know they're being recorded as opposed when they're not.
Okay, well, our last topic for the panel tonight, renewed calls for the bill known as Wynn's Law. The bill aims to make it mandatory for prosecutors to provide evidence of an accused's criminal history at a bail hearing. Opponents say it could create a backlog to an already overwhelmed judicial system. And Alberta MP Michael Cooper is concerned the federal government will not support the legislation.
It's not okay that this fatal loophole remains in the criminal code.
even if it's just one family that doesn't have to go through this, that's worth it. I will fight a lifetime for this to pass if I have to.
The bill was first introduced following the fatal shooting of St. Albert RCMP Constable David Wynn. Wynn shot in 2015 after confronting a suspected truck thief. The man responsible for his death was believed to have had more than 50 convictions, faced 38 outstanding charges, and failed to appear in court on several occasions. Greg, some say this is the Trudeau government putting partisan politics ahead of public safety. What's your take on the need for the legislation?
Well, look, I'm an Alberta boy, so I don't readily identifiable with Liberals at any point in time. But in this particular instance, I have to say I disagree with the Honourable Member of Parliament. This is not a loophole. This is the problem that we've had over the last 10 years of legislating the criminal justice system into a state where it's absolutely grinding into a halt. I've run hundreds of bail applications. I cannot remember actually a single incident in which a significant criminal record was not put before a judge. I mean, why would any prosecutor who's trying to keep an individual detained that could possibly be dangerous and possibly be a danger to the public not put the criminal record to the judge? To legislate it, there's no need to legislate it. It's common sense. These people are professionals. The Crowns are professionals. It may have happened on the odd occasion, may have happened as a once-off, but a once-off doesn't mean that we should be legislating these things.
Mark, what kind of impact do you feel this legislation would have?
Well, like Greg says, I mean, I have a lot of confidence in our justice system, and we don't hear about all the good decisions that happen day in and day out, and we have a very skilled and professional body of the Crown prosecutors. And I think it's important that they have some discretion and they have some opportunity to look at each case individually. Now, this is a very tragic incident, and my heart goes out to the family and the members of the RCMP and people that have been affected by this tragedy. But that doesn't mean that you have to look at this being the silver bullet that's going to fix things. And you know, and the other aspect about this that bothers me, and I don't know about other people, is that we always have to attach names to these bills. And it adds to the rhetoric, it adds to the emotional aspect. When we're looking at something, we should be looking at it objectively, and we should be looking at it from a legal perspective and a community perspective. And attaching names to this just I think it just politicizes it.
Erin, what do you feel is at stake here?
Well, I agree with Mark's comments about attaching names. I think that that's going down a path that really does incite a lot of emotion in people that that's probably not necessary. I think as well, part of my understanding of a bail hearing is that you would be looking, or that you have to still maintain that presumption of innocence, and therefore you can't necessarily always bring a criminal record to the forefront yet again on a case that has yet to be heard. So I know less about this, obviously, than my panelists, but I would certainly imagine that a Crown would bring forward any relevant evidence to a particular situation if he or she felt that that was going to make a difference in terms of the risk that that person played or was going to be for the public.
Folks, appreciate your insight as always. Thank you ever so kindly.